Hello and welcome to Portfolio Matters. This is going to be a very short special situation podcast about an upcoming court case over the Zama field in the Gulf of Mexico, which could affect the shares of Talos Energy. And thank you very much for our US viewer, Herman, for alerting me to this special situation. And we won't be going into great depths about the company itself. We just wanted to alert viewers to what is coming up so that they could be aware of it and look into it themselves if they were interested. But before we get into it, Richard will read the disclaimer.
Thank you, Keith. Everything discussed during the Portfolio Matters podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. Listeners should be aware that we will be discussing securities that we own or have a financial interest in. Please do your own research or consult a professional investment advisor before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned on the show. A full disclaimer can be found at the end.
Thank you, Richard. Right. Talos Energy are a heavily indebted US oil producer who some years ago made the Zama discovery in the Gulf of Mexico, which was then considered and celebrated as one of the largest discoveries in the world. However, the field straddled the borders of the block, and the adjacent block was owned by the Mexican state oil operator Pemex. Now, the courts have ordered Pemex and Talos to come to an agreement over the sharing of that field. And that is due to be decided by the 25th of this month. Okay, so this is the long-term chart of Talos Energy, and it ain't pretty. There's, like a lot of these oil companies, they basically over-invested in the good times, expecting the good times to continue, and when the good times didn't continue, they had too much debt. And so, on this chart, the current share price is a blip. We look at the more recent last 3 years, you can see there's still not looking very good even on this time scale, but they have debt, and above all, they've got the Zama field, or a share of it. Okay, so their current share price is $12.9. They're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They have a market cap of around $1 billion, but they've got a net debt of $1 billion. The market is currently expecting a negative result from the unitisation announcement, but let's go into this. So Talos Energy produce between 71 and 73,000 barrels a day of oil. The main assets are in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're heavily indebted, and as of 2020, loss-making. So their share price has been picking up recently because the oil price has been picking up, and with every highly indebted oil producer, an increase in the oil price leads through to a much greater increase in the share price. So they're boasting current liquidity of greater than 350 million, although frankly subsequent to this and saying that everything was fine, they then did a share raising in December, raising 74 million at $8.90. So the thing is, they clearly have too much debt for a loss-making company. Right, the Zama field. The important point about the Zama field is shown on the map here. So it's a big discovery, 670 to $1 billion barrels of oil. And depending on who you believe, the mean is around 800 million expected. So that is a huge resource. And Talos, who are the operator, drilled the exploration well, and then they've drilled 3 appraisal wells to get to an idea of how big the field is. And they currently own 35% of the field. Premier Oil the UK listed oil company, owns 25%, and a German company, Wintershall, own 40%. And this is their timeline for the development of it, and that frankly is already slipping. The unitisation negotiations with Pemex were due to finish in January, and they haven't. And now the court ordered deadline is 25th of March, which is this Thursday. So the most important recent discovery in Mexico. It's expected to hold, as I said, about 810,000 barrels of oil, and at its peak produce 167,000 barrels of oil a day, and that is enormous. Yeah. At 60 barrels a day, work it out, that's a lot. The operating costs are only about $20 per barrel. So this could be a hugely profitable field. Unfortunately, the discovery straddled the borders of the block, and the adjacent block was owned by Pemex. And the Mexican Oil Ministry, SENA, has told Pemex and Talos to negotiate a sharing of the field. And Talos are guiding that once the unitisation is completed, they expect to have around 21%. Although, frankly, I've got no idea how they've come to that number. So the bottom line is Talos have done all the work. They've drilled the 4 wells. They've provided all the technical data on Zama to the court and to Pemex. But Pemex are a Mexican company, and they know they're operating in the Mexican court system. And they're claiming, on the basis of frankly nothing at all, because they haven't done any work, that the majority of the field is in their block. And the market is expecting that Talos will lose the court case, and they will lose the majority ownership and the operatorship of the field. And they're expecting this because the market has a cynical view of Mexican courts. They think the Mexican court will favor Pemex. The Mexican regulators have already followed an irregular process in splitting the reservoir between Pemex and the current owners of the field. And particularly when Pemex then didn't drill a single confirmatory well on their side of the block, did not adjust their conclusions in favor of the people who had actually done the work. So the bottom line is, if the court rules against Talos, then not only will it lose some economic stake, so its ownership of the field will be downgraded, but the big downside would be that they lose the operatorship. If the operatorship is assigned to Pemex, Pemex are a big, slow state behemoth. And as you can see, thus far, they have drilled no wells. And if the operatorship is awarded to Pemex, then you can expect Pemex to be very slow in developing this field. And although Talos will retain some economic ownership of it, the NPV of the field will substantially drop because everyone's going to expect it to take years to develop this field and for then Talos to have a smaller stake of it. So this is all coming up on Thursday. And I'm going to include the links to various articles in the description of this podcast, and anyone who's interested can take a further look. I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait and see what happens. And because this could be transformative if the court case goes Talos's way. And as we have seen from recent developments in the UK market regarding ferroalloy resources, if there is a bit of news, it does actually take a few days for the market to fully sort of get to grips with the new news, and there is an opportunity, if you're fast, to get in early before the share price has moved completely. So something to watch. Richard, any
Great.
thoughts?
Very interesting, Keith. So we'll all be watching the news on Thursday afternoon as it comes out, and keeping a very close eye on the share price to see whether it's worth diving in and buying some, or whether it's steer well clear.
Well, absolutely. I think currently it's probably still well clear, but there's potential upside here. And I should also say that this is a negotiation between Talos and Pemex, and the deadline is Thursday, but anything could happen before then. I'm actually surprised it's got this close to the deadline. And the fact it has got this close to the deadline means that negotiations probably aren't going well. Anyway.
Yeah. Interesting. And thank you very much to Herman for bringing it to our attention.
Well, thank you very much to our growing community for sending us all these interesting little tidbits. And anyway, so I hope you all enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Please can you subscribe to the channel and press like. Goodbye.
So goodbye. Goodbye from Keith Jordan.
And goodbye from Richard Wheater. Goodbye.
Full disclaimer. The material and information contained in this podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only, and should not be relied upon for making a business, legal or any other decision. We may own or have a financial interest in any securities mentioned. Listeners should conduct their own research or consult a professional investment advisor before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned on the show. Whilst we endeavour to ensure that the information presented on the show is correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, with respect to the podcast and website, or to any information, products, services or related graphics discussed or presented in the podcast or website. Any reliance you place on such material is strictly at your own risk. You are solely responsible for the investment decisions you make. We will not be responsible for any errors or omissions in the podcast or website, including in articles or postings, for hyperlinks embedded in messages, or for any results obtained from the use of such information. Nor will we be liable for any loss or damage, including consequential damages, if any, caused by a reader's reliance on any information provided by the podcast or website. Please do not listen to the podcast if you do not accept self-responsibility for your actions.